Hmm. We are live. Hello. How are you today? My name is Shamele Jordon, and I am the host of Genealogy Quick Start. Genealogy Quick Start is available on YouTube, Facebook, and PhillyCam. If you have not done so yet, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also click the bell to receive notification. I got to tell you something. I recently was talking to a friend out west and she said, I don't mean no harm, but you have a really nice show, but you got to get your numbers up. So please help me out. Help me get my numbers up so I don't get a beating again. So subscribe if you feel that genealogy is important. And of course, please share with your friends. Also, let's not forget you who's already subscribed. Thank you. Thank you for following on Facebook, and thank you for watching on PhillyCam. I'm so happy that you are here today. So, whether you're watching live or in replay, let us know where you are. Where are you at? What town are you from? Which state are you from? Which society are you proud to be a member of? Blast it out in the chat. Let us know whether you're live or watching in replay, because guess what? We are always watching and trying to keep the conversation going. So today's program was a complete surprise to me. I had hoped that soon, at one point, that my buddy would join us. But normally, I'm inspired by a topic first. But this time, I was gifted by a wonderful dear friend with Mark Lowe. So today we're going to have Mark Lowe here, and he's always been a huge supporter. And anyone who has met him knows what that support feels like. So today, Mark is going to talk about deep diving into dad. Mark is always encouraging us to do things a little differently. And so this quick start that he created for us today is going to do just that. And then also we have our regulars that's going to talk about aerial images. So let's bring on my buddies, my friends, blogger, Michael John Neill, and where'd he go? Columnist and editor, Jim Beidler. How you guys doing today?
I'm good.
Very well.
Anything interesting happening in your genealogy life?
No, but some days a little boredom is not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing.
Nothing too exciting, but
you guys crack me up. In a minute, I'm going to have to make you stop talking, but now I'm like waiting for words, but it's okay. So first, let's see who we have here. We have Angela Allen's here. We have Paula from Portland, Tennessee. I've never heard of Portland, Tennessee. Hello, Ari from Dallas. We have Linda from Florida, Deborah Roof from Maryland. We have Jenny from Lincoln Lancaster Genealogy Society, our first genealogy society mention. All right. We also have, who's this from Cleveland? Joe is here from Cleveland. Joe, we have a surprise for you today. And also we have Mildred, who is here from Colorado. So if you didn't tell us where you're from, let us know where you're from. Also, if you have not subscribed, I'm going to drop the link in here. Please go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube. Thank you. So, Michael and Jim, what are we talking about today? You guys came up with this. You guys always come up with these interesting topics. So, what are we talking about today?
Today I'm going to see what it says. Oh, the screen says aerial images. So that's what we're talking about today. kind of forget how I discovered this site, but it's aerial photographs. We're going to look at a lot of rural areas today, but they're images. The examples were taken in the 50s and the 60s for the most part, and we'll talk a little bit how to navigate those. It's one of the things about it is it's a whole different perspective when you try to find these people, as we're going to talk about. You're looking at things from above, and you don't really realize how different things look from the sky.
Like Superman. This is the Superman. This is the super genie view.
Well, we don't want to get my ego too large today, but it's a whole different perspective. The one we're going to show later. I mean, I've been there a bazillion times, but I haven't been from that perspective, and it takes a little while. It's just a neat perspective.
All right. So what was really cool about it is that you wrote a really cool blog about it. So you can definitely let folks have that link.
Shamele, I tried to do that. It would not let me put that in the comments, but it is in our private chat.
Okay. So I'll put it in the comments.
Yeah, where I normally talk about you, that's where I put it. So, you'll see it in there. But it wouldn't let me share it for some reason.
Let me see. Oh, look. So I put the link in there to the blog. We have Camden County Historical Society here. Hello, Wayne from Magnolia. We have Lansdale, PA. Good. It's rare for you to be here. We are so happy to have you. We have Benita from North Carolina and Maria Capaldi. Maria, we couldn't get this show started until you got here, girl. Glad you made it. We have Quintilla from we have another, and she is repping African American Genealogical Society of Cleveland. We have Stephen from DC. We have Paul Holmes from South Holland, Illinois. Leslie from Akron, Ohio. We have Kathy from Raleigh, North Carolina. You guys are from everywhere. Oberlin. Okay, I think Ohio is trying to take over the show. I think that somebody told somebody our secret. Oh, and we have Nancy Nelson from the Genealogical Society of Pennsylvania. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Let's get started with aerial images or the super genie view. So first, why are these even important?
Well, they give you historical perspective, either on an ancestor's property or the property you own now, or as you'll see in my case, that's both things. We know basically what the here and now looks like, but how did properties change over time? Different buildings, different trees, different land uses.
Another thing is just it's a different image, a different perspective, and sometimes that can be a way to get people interested that might not be interested. They don't, a lot of your relatives do not want to look at copies of old documents, as interesting as they may be, and you might not have pictures of dead people, but you might have pictures of places. And as Jim mentioned, and as the one that we'll see in my illustration anyway, buildings are there that are not there and vice versa. So you can see how things change. And it can even be kind of a game for somebody familiar with some of these local areas to go through and see if they can figure out what places are.
I love gamifying genealogy. So let's see, what's the first step? Step one for aerial images, of course, is determine the place and time, the crosshair of the genealogy, right?
And you with the location to use these effectively, because they are not really indexed. You may get lucky and they may be a little bit, but when we say a place, we want you to be as specific as you can be. We don't just mean somewhere in Adams County, Illinois, or somewhere in Butler County, Ohio. You want to be as specific as you can, and keep in mind your relatives might have owned the property. You may know where it's at. In the case of my parents, which is not one of the illustrations used, it's a rental property. And so if you don't know where that's at, because leases aren't one of those things that people maintain and keep records of, you might have to do a little bit of digging around to figure out, what farm or what property was somebody renting in 1968 or whatever the year happens to be.
And so how would they find that out?
You're going to have to talk to people who might have known. And if your relatives don't know, one place to potentially get outside the relative pool, which really sounds kind of bad, by the way, But to
In
get
some
outside,
cases, it's a good idea to get
right?
outside.
It is. But we're not having that discussion today. That's not this conversation. But there may be a Facebook group for. This is where I grew up. There's a Daysby, whatever, I forget what they call it, but it's for people who grew up there, and they're not. Most of them aren't genealogists, but I could simply say, my mother went to this grade school in the 1940s and 50s. I don't know where they live because it was a rental farm, and I can't ask her anymore. Does anybody know about where they might have lived? And there might be people, of her age that are still alive that might know they rented the blah blah place or whatever that may be. So sometimes you might have to get outside that family pool, so to speak,
Okay.
to get some of those things.
Or you might have to deal with home sources like letters, like letters with return
Oh.
addresses on, and the people's addresses.
And on the census records too, they
Yeah,
might have, if it's urban, they'll have
but
the
that that often these addresses in the countryside will have changed. A lot
yeah.
of times they just start out with rural delivery one, route one, and then I know we went through at least 2 box changes before we got a street address where I live. So
All right, so that's step one, the crosshairs of genealogy that we always talk about. You start with a place and time. You have to drill in there. And so step two is, you guys said, to find a contemporary map. So what are you, Beidler went all Zillow on us. I thought thank you for going outside the box. That was kind of a cool idea. So let's go.
yeah, well, and this kind of shows the maps where when we get to the aerial map databases, as Michael said, 50s, 1960s, and so forth. That was the technology they had to do tax assessment maps, to create these aerial photos that they then try to sell to the people. That was the best technology they had. Well, now we have Zillow. And again, there's intersection with technology because, of course, Zillow is trying to tell you how much your house is worth. And what we showed up there was the contemporary shot of the house that I live in, that's been in my family for 100 years this year.
I kind of like to follow up on that a little bit. If you're going to have to look at these images manually, if you could get if you're familiar with the phrase plat book or township atlas showing who owned those properties in the 1960s or whatever, that will help you when you navigate through these images. If it's someplace you grew up and you're familiar with, you probably don't know that. But if it's not, you're going to need that. You're going to need some contemporary map to help you get that perspective.
Okay, so for step three, we have learn the local features. So what does that mean? Oh my gosh, this is so crucial with
this
me.
really means the movies that were playing at the time. No, sorry, I thought that was funny.
Unfortunately, I did too.
Apparently, it took a while to get to Pennsylvania from the look on his face. Sometimes there'll be a photograph of a church or a cemetery, the local elevator, things of that type, and that can help you when you're going through these houses that look different from above. Oh, that's the church that was 2 miles down the road, or that was the grade school or the cemetery, and then you're kind of in the right place. It helps give you a perspective. And if you're going to have to search parts of these where you don't have previously located locations, then you'll want those local features. So churches, cemeteries, schools, anything of that type that is easier to spot. Because a church looks, from the air, oh, that's a church. It's hard to tell sometimes which house is which house looking at them quickly.
I love railroad tracks. Those are my favorite because a lot of times they go back in time, like they've been around for a long time. So those are helpful. All right. So understand those local features, because seriously, like what you said, from up above, it's like a whole nother world. So you got to first understand how to see what you're looking at now. And then step 4 is to browse aerial maps. So where do you find these maps?
Well, one place is the website that's in the comments, which is, what's the name of it? Historical aerial photos, I think was what it was. That the name of it? I'm losing the.
The one that yours is on is
Yeah, the one that
vintage.
mine is on.
That's
Vintage
vintage.
aerial,
Virtual
vintage aerial,
aerial.
vintage aerial. I
Vintage
mean,
aerial, yeah.
yeah, vintage aerial was the one that we used. There are others that have them as well. What this place did, they acquired the rights to display these images, and they pretty much just put them online, one roll of film at a time, just in the order in which the photographer took the pictures. What you see, this is from the blog post that I wrote
I
about it.
love this title, Grandpa's Truck as Seen from the Air.
I was really lucky that my grandfather's truck is in the drive there south of the house. I had to. This was one that had not been previously identified, and I mean I knew where Grandma's house was at, but I had to. Someone had identified a house about a mile or two up the road, and I had located that, and then I just had to click one image after the other. And you're kind of like the census taker when you're going through these. It's very analogous to how the census taker took the census, one right after the other. But this image, when you get them on the site, there's a watermark on them. This was one that I purchased the rights to use that. This is fairly zoomed in. The one that you're seeing here is when I magnified it, because again, keep in mind, we're looking at this from above, taken in a moving. People sometimes say they're kind of blurry. It was taken in the 60s from a moving airplane with the technology of the time. This is not the FBI 3 weeks ago. So this was about as zoomed in as I could get before the magnification really
No, that was great.
really started to distort a little bit. But I could see the pots where Grandma had flowers in the yard. I can see the shrubs. When we look, is the next image there, or is that in a different step? This is the larger image, not zoomed in. When I recognize the house is no longer there. It's a new chicken shed. You can see Grandma's outhouse, but you really have to know where it's at because it's kind of hidden by the trees. But this is a lovely picture. I mean,
Great.
almost all those buildings are still there. But the problem is if the house is torn down or the barns are different or the silo's gone or whatever, that can kind of skew your ability to find it, particularly if there are buildings that were there in the 60s or 70s that are not there today. If it's someplace you're familiar with, a lot of things could be torn down and you might not realize that's what it is because it looks significantly different today, or if they modified the house and things of that type. So it's important to look and see if there are, as we mentioned before, neighboring locations that have been identified. And sometimes then you can kind of get, when you have that contemporary map with you, you can just kind of, this is a church or a cemetery or whatever, kind of get a feel for how that guy is going, flying down the road or whatever.
So Jan Murphy says she uses, and Jan Niece's music to my ears. She uses the GNIS, USGS GNIS, the Geographic Name and Information System. Great.
Right. Yeah, that's a good idea. This site does allow users to go in, and if they know what something is, to tag that location with either the name of the owner, name of the physical feature, whatever it is. And so at this site, but that is what I did first. I typed in name of the church, name of the cemetery. If that did not work, when I was trying to find Grandma's house and where I grew up a half a mile away, I was just typing in last names of the neighbors, hoping somebody had. Unfortunately, nobody had. And the house that was identified nearest to my grandmother's was one that GNIS and all those sites are great, but this was the house that had a name that's not in GNIS. It's what all the locals called it. House of the Seven Gables, because it had a large number of gables. I'm not even sure if it really had seven, but that's what we called it. And that was the one that got me kind of started, and I had to go down the highway to find my grandparents' home.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what you found. I'm pretty sure Beidler, as competitive as you guys are, has found something as well.
I heard somebody helped him.
Oh
I
yes.
heard. That's what I heard. Little
You
birdie told me.
you heard correctly, Michael. Yeah, I really cheated because there's a local photographer in my area, a guy named Glenn Regal, who I mean he has his own drone. He does all sorts of things, and so he got fascinated with these, and so I kind of I mean he posted one. And then I just kind of tickle him like, oh, geez, I don't have the time right now, but I'd really love to see. Well, it only took a night, and he emailed and said, "Does this look familiar?" And of course, this is my place in Bern Township, Berks County, Pennsylvania. House, barn. At that point, there was a big garden and a lot more trees than there are today. And that's one of the differences. Now I don't know which company, but in the late '70s, another company. You see these are in black and white. A company did these in color, and my parents did bite, and they bought a big one for at home and a smaller one to send along with me to college, so I'd be able to see what was home. And we when we got them, we were thinking, well, now when was this take? When exactly, did they take this? Oh, and you could see there was enough detail in that color photo. You could see all the tomatoes that my parents had harvested and kept outside on
Oh,
a picnic bench. You could see this red area, and it's like, okay, that had to be mid-August, because that's when their tomato crop was coming in. So, and I still have that color one in my home.
I love that. You didn't take a picture of it and share it with us? I mean, isn't this like
Nah.
a Kickstarter share and be friends? All right.
You know,
You'll
Shamel, you asked if I had any contemporary pictures of the home that was in the image, and I went and looked, and the problem was I don't, because all the pictures I have that were taken on that property are either of tractors, livestock, hay, or livestock. That's
The
or,
things
or
most
taken
important to the farm.
exactly, or taken inside the house of us. So there's no picture. I couldn't find a picture of the outside of the actual house.
Well, Jim also took a look at another place called Historic. So the other ones we were looking at vintage aerials. This one's historic aerials. Talk to us about this one, Jim.
Yeah, well, this one has a nice interface where it comes up here with a Google Maps type map, and so I could locate my area. This one does not. This one looks like it was more for tax assessment purposes, the originals that they're getting their database from, because these are the other ones are kind of taken at an angle, more like what we call a bird's eye view, uh, because you're trying to set up the property to sell a photo of that property. These are completely top down. And you can see they have them over a number of different years for more than half a century.
Yeah.
Oh, now these are often fuzzy, especially as you go back in time. But they're useful to again locate the property over time. Because here you have about a dozen different shots over the years. So
Some of those, I think, we discussed this in the prep session. I think the USDA Agricultural Stabilization and Soil Conservation Service.
yes.
If I'm getting all those words in the right order, those pictures were taken because if you wanted to participate in various government agricultural programs, and your neighbors would watch you to make sure you were doing what you weren't supposed to be doing, but they use those maps to you can plant crops here, you can't plant crops there, and this and that. Those aerial maps, and that's why they go back. I'm kind of guessing that's why those go back to about the 40s, because that's when a lot of that started. But those were done with, and for some of those pictures were taken also, as we mentioned, for tax assessment purposes too.
No, that's a good point. That Department of Ag stuff, was important and is probably a source of many of them.
And so, I just Googled and it seemed like there were a lot of different places, but it seemed like Vintage was kind of the one that had a lot there. So check them out. Different coverages. I tried to come up with a way to synthesize like coverage time and areas, but they're so all over the place. So that's what genealogists do. We dig. And so step 5, after you've browsed them, and Michael said this is pretty freaking important. And we're not one to, spend a lot of time saying, citation, citation, citation. But because of how these images are arranged, if you want to get back to them, you got to be pretty clear, right, Michael?
Yes. And in the blog post, it's got briefly how I did that. Were my commas and semicolons in the right place?
I need to go double check.
I'm not sure about that, but it basically was, and you can look at the image to be sure, state, county, year, and then I think there were roll or can numbers and then image numbers. You just want to make sure you've got enough detail to get back to it. So mainly if you want to get a better image, or if you want to buy it, perhaps, or if you want to look for the neighbors, if you can't get back, and that's a lot of it. If you want to look for the neighbors and you can't get back to the one you found, it's going to be really difficult. Another thing, and this is mentioned in the blog post, but if you're using one where a lot of people are not identified, mention the website to people who are from the area and grew up there. They might have no interest in genealogy, but they may be able to help identify some of the locations, and that may help you in turn figure out the specific locations that you're interested in.
And if the site, I'm pretty sure Vintage allows you to label the places either by address or other features. Add to the metadata. Help the next person out. Even though they're probably not looking for your property, they may be looking for something on the same road as your property. So do save some stick for the next person.
And if you are identifying one, don't just put grandma used to live here and she grew taters in the yard. You've got you may care, but nobody else cares about grandma's taters. Put Susan and Thomas Smith lived here, maybe the address or even rural route 5. If that's as specific as you have, that might help somebody else that's trying to figure out, in 1970, where was rural route 5 for that town.
All right. So guys, that was amazing. Everyone, any questions you have, please type them into the chat. And I'm going to put up, these are the steps. So if you're interested in aerial images, the Super Genie view, you want to do step 1, which is determine a place and time. Step 2 is to locate a contemporary map. Step 3 is to learn the local features. Step 4 is to browse aerial images. There's a decent amount of them out there to have fun in. And step 5, of course, is to document your findings so that you can get back to those images and be more descriptive than grandma, whatever Michael said. So, guys, thank you so much for that quick start. And we will see you guys at the end.
All right.
Thanks, Shamele.
I'll be here.
All right, so it is now time for our extra special guests. So please get ready to welcome a man who encourages us to think differently, to mull and ponder. Where is he? Mr. Mark Lowe. How are you, Mark?
I'm great, Shamele. So good to be here and see everybody here. It's good to be in the quick start room today.
So, Mark, I don't know if everyone knows, I actually created a mull and ponder playlist just for Mark. There's no other genealogist on this earth. You guys probably don't know, I created playlists. It's called Jazz and Genes. And if you go to genealogyquickstart.com for each show, I used to create a playlist. And for one of those shows, I created one called Mull and Ponder. So it's that kind of jazz that makes you kind of sit in that those cool Adirondack chair. No, they're not Adirondack chairs. What kind of chairs are your specific?
Rocking chairs.
Rocking chairs. And I added the music if you're into jazz.
It's a wonderful playlist. I listen to it all the time. I love it.
So, Mark, what are you here to talk? What kind of your quick start just kind of blew me away. So, tell me about this quick start and why you think deep diving into dad is so important.
I think we think we know a lot about people around us. And I was working on timelines and sharing that with other folks. Like, so glad to have the folks from Oberlin and Cleveland that I know I talked to them about timelines. And in the process of talking about that, I really realized that one of our weaknesses sometimes is to focus a little tighter on an individual, especially even the ones you think you know a lot about. So I really got that idea of, let's deep dive. Let's really tighten the focus on somebody I think I know pretty well. And so that's my dad. And so that's what I did. Let's look more closely at the events in his life. And can I learn more than just what I think I know? And by the way, it works.
I love that. I love that. I don't know if you guys do this. If you have living parents, I gave my mom this really big, giant book called, and I got it from Amazon, The Story of a Lifetime, where it has all these questions and they can just, whenever time permits or they think about it, answer those questions. And I just think it, and I said, you can write whatever you want and you don't have to give it to me until you don't ever have to give it to me. I'll get it at the end, So she has a lot of fun with it. So that's one way that you can do the deep dive after they're gone. So Mark, let's go ahead and start with step one.
Okay.
Start for deep diving into dad. So you said for step one was choose an ancestor. We said dad because that's who you chose, but it doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter. I mean, in fact, I think it's a good example for us to share this as a quick start to show that I chose somebody that was right there and very obvious. But this would work just as well if I chose a cousin or a grandparent or an aunt or a great-great-grandparent. So the whole point is to begin to focus. And I could have done my mom and certainly will do that. But I chose my dad because what's happened to me in the last few months, even though my dad's been gone over 30 years, there's things that happened just in the last 2 months that made us rethink things about our dad that we knew, but had come back around.
Wow.
Family goes long. I'm the youngest. I'm the
You're
youngest.
the baby. I knew you were the baby.
baby.
I should have known you were the baby.
Yeah. So I've heard the stories from all of them, but and we lost one of my brothers right after Thanksgiving.
Sorry.
And what's interesting in that is when they were writing his obituary, and that's another thing. If you think about it, it's probably not a bad idea to kind of write your own obituary. Think about the things that are important to share with your kids and your family. But his family wrote that he had been a fireman for 52 years. And so in that thought, I'm like, really? How was he a fireman? So going back to my dad, it makes all the sense in the world if I start looking at this story. And so it could be done just on plain paper. I could do it in Excel spreadsheet. I can collect the data, but it's so important to decide why did you choose this person and why do you want to focus on them? So I had a couple of questions in mind.
Okay. And so you picked a person, you documented it out. And so you have step two, after you choose the ancestor, is to then create I love timelines, Mark.
Yeah, I do too. I think they're a tool that we should use always. And you may not know all the details, and that's okay. Start with a very basic timeline. And it could be nothing more than, if it's someone you don't know very well, it could be the beginning and the end. And I think what I'm encouraging you to do is, once you start working on the timeline, then pick a section of where that person is involved and deep dive. But you've got to have the timeline to kind of know where the events occur. And for example, if I ask you, about this person that you're choosing, what do you know about them when they were 9 years old? What do you know about them when they were 6? Well, we don't. Maybe if it's your parent, you don't know those things. But you know what? Those are the things that shape us. Yeah. And if we go back and figure out a few of those, you suddenly know these people you're researching in a much better way. It's amazing.
It is amazing. And it's all like they have this new term called generational trauma. There's a generational, I don't know what the opposite of trauma is, but there's that good stuff, that positive stuff that they instill in us too. My mom just told me this story. I never heard about her selling pulls or something to get a Barbie. She sold all these tickets around the neighborhood to get a Barbie. And the prize actually went up to her first cousin. So there's a picture somewhere that I have to find with the two of them sitting on the step with their Barbies. And of course, they didn't have, black Barbies back then. So that's a whole nother story, right? So you got to create that timeline. How do you create a timeline? I
tend to use just an Excel spreadsheet. And also certainly the software programs that many of us use to collect our family, they have some built-in timelines. So you might actually look at the software you're using. It may have some things where you can add items and print them in a timeline format. And if not, plain paper works great.
It sure does. Old school.
Whatever's close at hand works.
All right. So you created a timeline.
I did.
And then step 3 is to choose an event.
Right. And that may be the hardest part, because you don't have to choose one event at a time. But in order to do a deep dive and actually focus on that part of this person that you're focused on, then you do have to choose an event. You have to choose something that happened so that you can look at the event, the people involved, and what all happened around that event, because that's where we find the answers.
So you chose an event.
I did. This is the business. This was my dad's feed business back in Cedar Hill. And you talk about a place that you could spot in an aerial photo. That would be a place that you could identify. In fact, what's interesting is you can barely see in the left of that picture, there's a white building. That's actually the Methodist church. That's the Baptist church that's right next door. And across the street, where you see the wire fence down at the bottom, that's actually the fence for the Methodist church. So it's in the center of the little town where we grew up in Cedar Hill, Tennessee. It was a large feed business that had actually gone back. This building was probably completed about 1884.
Okay.
So it was an old build. It was an old feed mill, and my dad purchased it and moved he and my mom and before I was born in this town. So they moved from Kentucky into this and had the business. It's an important event because it's something I had heard about my whole life. And of course, I worked in the feed mill until I went off to college, but it wasn't this building.
Okay.
And that's the event that I had heard. In fact, my first cognizant memory is when I was 2 years old.
Okay.
And it was New Year's Eve when I was 2 years old. And I can remember my dad wrapping me up in an orange plaid blanket and carrying me outside. And I remember the fireworks. I had crew. The funny thing is, what I'm finding out and focusing on is something that happened when I was 2 years old, but I don't remember it.
Wow.
And it's a significant event. So you already know what the event is. But once you choose it, if you stop and look at a person's life, what is it that influenced them the most? And if you begin to think about it, you can actually find various events that will lead you to go into the right direction. So I chose an event. And let me just say, I chose an event that dealt with that building, and it was a fire.
Okay. A fire.
A fire.
So
and it could
tell
have
us
been a
about
house
this.
fire, but in this case, it was a destruction of that business. It occurred in the spring of 1958, and it's pretty well documented, but I'm 2 years old. I don't remember it. I remember parts of it, but I don't remember what happened. So to choose that event and finding out how it affected my dad and who was there, that's the step now. So I've chosen that event.
Okay. And so you gave us some additional images to share.
I did. So rather than deal with loss, I think we probably do show some destruction in there too. That there was nothing left, and in fact, you just saw that building. That is exactly what was there afterwards. Nothing was left in that building except the metal grain storage bin was still there. But shortly after this happened that night, my dad, who's standing on that pile of lumber nearest us, had said to us, and I do remember this discussion, that we'll be okay. He had gotten a job back with the folks in Kentucky where he had come from before. And he said, we're going to go live with some family back in Kentucky and we'll be fine. Got a job. And somebody came and knocked on our door. And I still remember that. And my mom went to the door. We were all sitting in the living room, and the door was right there at the living room. And my mom went to the door and opened it. And at that point, a group of people came into our living room and said to my dad, his name was JW, and they said, Jay, we need you and your family. We need you to stay here. We've got lumber. We've got labor. We will rebuild your business. We need you to stay in this community.
Wow.
Okay. Then my thought is, how do I learn as a 2-year-old, those people who said that to us have information, right?
Yeah.
And if I can figure out who's involved, then those are people that I need to ask what happened.
Yeah.
What were the circumstances? What do you remember? And go from there.
Okay.
You know what? It's a traumatic event in a town. Think about something that big that happens. Everybody who lived there has some memory of it often.
Sure.
And it damaged both of those churches. It blistered the paint. It broke windows. So people who went to those churches were aware of that event. This business that was that big went away. I mean, it burned it down to nothing.
Wow. Did they ever, researching you, so these images, were they within the family, or were they at a historical society that you found these images?
A little of both, Shamele. You're only seeing a few of these. And to be honest with you, some of them now, I don't know how they got back to my family. And some of them did not. But probably 20 years ago, I wrote a local history column for my community paper. And in the process, I wrote, so that would have been in 2008, I wrote this story because it was 50 years ago. And the title of the article was 50 Years Ago, A Fire in Cedar Hill. And so I told the story from what I knew and what I had heard about it. And I described it, and I talked about the people donating the lumber, and I talked about it being rebuilt. And all of a sudden, I started hearing from people who told me exactly what I'm trying to say now. A few of those people came to me and said, hey, I know this, or I know that. The man that I went to church with said, well, I kept the book. I'm the person that kept up with the people who donated logs for lumber.
Oh my goodness.
So you can tell me all the list of that. And then I did a supplement in the paper. Fortunately, talk about documenting it. I documented it rather publicly because I did a follow-up article and included those names in that follow-up, which I'm glad I did because I didn't get the book from the man. He's since passed away. His family doesn't know what happened to the book. And so that's gone. And so what do I do otherwise? So I do have some notes, but I also have newspaper clippings that follow up after the fact. So this is several years after. So when you start researching the event, then you look at the people. And this newspaper clipping actually has the names of everybody, almost everybody that helped participate in the event. And it's not so important, that who they are. I know who they are. And in reality, all of them are now, they're gone on to their reward. They're people I knew. But then in addition to that, if I looked in other newspaper clippings before this, at the time of the fire, these same men were involved in a committee to help rebuild the mill, help to solicit the lumber, and all of that. I found names for lots of people to interview. Now, the reason this story goes on and makes such a difference in my family's life, there was no fire department. When that mill burnt in 58, it burnt to the ground. There was no fire department.
Oh.
Shortly after that, this is 1963, just shortly after that, my dad and all the people in the community realized there's a need in a rural area for a fire department. So in 1963, they started a volunteer fire department, and that's what they're doing. They're laying the footing for that first fire department.
Okay.
That fire implemented a new fire department.
Yeah.
It also changed the way we lived, because my dad said to us, these people, we owe our livelihood to the people who rebuilt this community. We owe them something. So that you talk about the connection over time. The service to a community, the civil aspect of serving, is often generational and continues. So from that point, my dad then was the fire chief for that local fire department. All of my brothers and myself all participated as volunteer firemen from the time we were young, as long as we could. In fact, I know I've told the story that our phone number became the fire hall number. If there was a fire in town, there was no fire department. It rang our house. And so from the time then I was 7 years old, I had to know how to dispatch.
Oh my goodness.
We didn't have a radio. They'd call and tell me there was a fire. I would write it down. I would hang up and I would call my dad or the assistant chief, tell them where the fire was, and they would tell me who to call. And I would call them and tell them where to meet them, either at the fire truck or somewhere on the way. And then the truck they would meet at the fire and whatever. And they were did very successful that way for a long number of years. But my brother started as a kid, and he served from then on for 52 years. Wow. So he served as a volunteer fireman. Later, he became a professional fireman for the county we live in. Okay. He became a professional fireman in the city where we live. And then before he passed, he was a volunteer fireman out in the rural area. My dad was a fireman. After he left the feed business, he retired and he became a fireman. I have a nephew now who's a full-time fireman, professional fireman in the city where I live. I have another nephew who's a fireman in Kentucky. It became such a part of my family. Why? Because of this event.
Wow.
If you ignore the event, not only do you lose the information about why people did something, but you also lose those connections to all those people who made a difference. Think about it. Those people didn't sell lumber.
Right.
For that business. They gave trees
Yeah.
They built it. And so when I meet people when people know me in that community, they know my dad, they knew my mom, they know my siblings. In fact, I'm often referred to as one of the Lowe boys. I'm just one of a bunch.
The baby Lowe.
The funny thing is, I'm the baby. I'm the youngest one. So my older brother, who is in his upper 70s, was just a teenager at the time. Now you talk about the people. That's a good thought. Who knew a lot about that? The teenagers in my family, my older brothers and my sister.
Okay.
And so, this is a chance to go ask them, not about everything else, but to go focus on this event. I can ask my aunts that are still living because they probably helped sort through the situation. So definitely the step is when you find the event and look at the people, look beyond just what you know. Look at people who may know more than you. Look at people who may have heard it from somebody else. It could be somebody who you could ask somebody who was a child if they even heard from a parent about this event, and they did.
Oh, that is amazing connection. Like out of us, what seems like a tragedy becomes a lifelong dedication to service through your family.
My parents reserved, this is a chunk of bronze. It's actually coins, and I have a couple of chunks. This is the chunk I was given as a child, and all of us were given a chunk of this metal. And this is the big chunk that my parents kept that I have in the box. This is actually, it's just coin that was left in the cash box that was in the fire. And so that was given to us. So you think about it, that was my gift from that. And think about what it tells me, much more than just its coins melted together. It's the phoenix rising from the ashes. It's new business. It's my family's connection. It's my connection to that community. As long as wherever I may live, I will always have a connection to that town because of what happened to my family when I was 2 years old.
Unbelievable. That is amazing. So that's step 4. I still have some goose pimples. I'm trying to move forward.
Okay. And you've got, I know in part of the document findings too, we've got I think you have a picture of the new building.
Let's see. Let's bring up that
Lowe
new
female
building
on the side.
Let's see. New building. Let's see. Oh.
It's the one before that one, I think. That one. That was the new building. That was the one that was built by the community. That was my dad's business until now it's no longer there either. It's gone. It's been torn down since then. But we were in business from that fire. He had been in business since 1954. We continued in business until about 1980. Okay. And so that building was built by that community. So I guess when everybody, to me, it was just my dad's business. Yeah. But when you drove by, that was the feed mill that had burnt. And that connected with everybody in the community because everybody then, remember, it was a rural area, a farming area. People brought their grain in to be ground with hay for their cattle, for their pigs, etc. Mm-hmm. So everybody depended on having that mill. That's why they needed it. Yeah. We sold, feed and all that sort of thing. And so that was the family business, but it was the community's business.
It was the community. You really belong to the community. You really belong to the community.
In fact, when my dad became the first mayor of that town since Reconstruction, they got a new water system about 1963, about the same time they got a fire department. They still have the same water system today. Okay. And in fact, all of my siblings helped lay the water lines with the town crew for many years.
So mark that. This is a great idea. Let's go ahead and look at the steps that Mark has created for this quick start, deep dive into dad or any relative, but be specific. Step 1, choose an ancestor. Step 2 is to go ahead and create a timeline. Jan and I love timelines. Step 3, choose an event. Step 4 is to research the event and the people. Don't forget about the people aspect. Living people, go talk to them. Step 5, document the findings. Mark, thank you so much for that quick start. Let us bring back to the stream my buddies, Michael and Jim. Is that your name, Jim? And my surprise person, Dr. Debbie. How are you, Dr. Debbie? You must have told everybody in Ohio you were going to be on today. That's what happened. So
I think they came from Mark. They came from Mark.
So we have less than 3 minutes. And the question of the day is, Mark talked about events. Is there an event that you can think of right now, very briefly, that you would like to dig in on a little bit more, or you'd like to be a fly on the wall and go back in time and watch? So just name the event and the person. And yeah. So Mark, Mark, you already did your event. Jim and Michael, you guys want to give us events? And Mark, think of another event. Jim, Michael.
I'll go first.
You go.
I would have liked to have been a fly on the wall in the county recorder's office when my 16-year-old grandmother and her mother signed for her permission to get married in 1941.
How old was she?
16.
Whoa, I want to go back there too. Jim?
I can't believe we did not prearrange this, but I'd like to know the circumstances of my 15-year-old grandmother getting married in 1911. So.
Oh my goodness, Mark, you have one for us?
Absolutely. There's another event in my dad's life. He was injured playing on a pond scraper when he was a kid, and I want to find out about it because it equates to a story about some hobos on a train who got arrested and taken to Louisville, and I want to hear the whole story.
I love that. Hobos on a train. Dr. Debbie, very quickly.
I would like to go back to 1918 and see how my grandfather survived the flu epidemic and took care of his family.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. Anyone out here? Let's see. Did anyone else put any comments? Everyone loved your guys' your show ideas. You guys did fantastic. Jan says her husband's family has a lot of firemen. Firemen is like, that's kind of like military men. You just have a lot of them in the family. But everyone, thank you so much for joining us on Genealogy Quick Start today. And put that event out there into the ether, let your ancestors know you want to know more. And guess what? You probably will learn more. So again, thank you so much for watching Genealogy Quick Start. And like Mark's sign said, what does it say? Keep exploring.
Keep exploring.
Keep exploring, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Take
Shamele.
care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Shamele.
Thanks, everybody.